And here comes the main attraction. And they're on their feet. Rose walking toward the plate. The most famous number 14 in the history of this game. And trying to make history right here in the first inning tonight. He levels the bat a couple of times. Shao kicks and he fires. Rose swings.
There it is! There it is! Get out! Get out! All right!
Hit number 4192. A live drive single into left center field. A clean base hit. And it is pandemonium here at Riverfront Stadium. The fireworks exploding overhead. The Cincinnati dugout has emptied. The applause continues unabated. Rose completely encircled by his teammates at first base. Joe, quite an emotional scene here at the ballpark.
Another base hit. Yes, it is.
And Rose now recognizing this outpouring of affection from the standing room only crowd as he turns a complete circle, waving and doffing his batting helmet to the crowd. And the folks on this date, September the 11th, certainly have not been disappointed one iota.
An almost unbelievable sight here at Riverfront Stadium on this September the 11th, 1985.
Well,
what an outstanding show.
I'll tell you what, there's never been a hometown athlete more loved by the residents, the natives of that city than Pete Rose is loved by the people of Cincinnati, Ohio.
That was the voice of Marty Brennaman. And the voice you heard in the background screaming, "Get down, get down," that was Joe Nuxhall. They were famously known as Marty and Joe. They were so famous that if fans would write a letter and they would address it to Marty and Joe, Cincinnati, Ohio, the United States Post Office knew to deliver that fan letter to Riverfront Stadium. Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of Crafting the Call. I'm Josh Suchon.
And I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler. Nobody's yet calling us the Josh and Jesse Show. We will be discussing Getting Down with Marty Brennaman, which means we'll be listening to some Marty and Joe highlights, Josh.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to dive into this because this is an iconic duo. Marty Brennaman was on the microphone for 41 years. His partner was former Cincinnati Red Joe Nuxhall for 31 years. And they, I think, epitomize what it meant to be a duo on the radio. And overwhelmingly, Jesse, this episode is going to be about Marty because he did play-by-play. You and I do play-by-play. So we're mostly going to be listening to him, but we're going to hear plenty of Joe in the background.
I think it's important to get into this. We've talked about Vin Scully, and one of the classic thoughts about Vin is Vin as the solo act, doing the one-man broadcast. I believe wholeheartedly in the two broadcaster system, in the play-by-play person and the color, and both of them experiencing things together. And right there, you hear the great vocabulary of Marty Brennaman, the idea of trying to take this moment and describe everything that he sees, and Joe feeling it every step along the way.
They were most famous, Marty and Joe, for not just what they talked about baseball, but about tomato plants and about anything else that would come to their mind. And that was part of their charm. And I'm really interested to get into the background of Marty Brennaman because this was a guy who initially was broadcasting games for the Tidewater Tides in the International League. And he had a general manager by the name of Dave Rosenfield. Dave's one of the most legendary minor league baseball executives who are out there. There's a famous story about how Al Michaels was broadcasting for the Reds. At the end of the 1973 season, Al Michaels leaves the Reds and goes to broadcast for the San Francisco Giants. So the Reds need an announcer. They're at the winter meetings, and Dave Rosenfield, again, this is the minor league baseball general manager. He goes up to an executive of the Cincinnati Reds, and he says, "I heard you guys have an opening. I have the best stand broadcaster in the country in Norfolk. If we send you a tape, will you listen to it?" And the Reds executive said yes. And so Dave gets on the phone with Marty Brennaman and says, "Get your tape." Yes, cassette tape. Get your cassette tape to Cincinnati. There was 220 people who applied for the job, and Marty Brennaman got the job to be the lead play-by-play announcer for the Cincinnati Reds in 1974.
I know general managers who don't want their broadcaster to leave, who get worried and will actually do hires so that the broadcaster that they bring in isn't going to jump ship the next year or the year after that in the old broadcaster minor league baseball version of the transfer portal. They'll try to do whatever they can to find a guy who can stay. And here's the opposite. Here's the general manager, and a great one at that, basically serving as the hype man, basically saying, here's my guy, which all of us need. If you are going to get a job, you need somebody fighting for you. And that's exactly what Marty had, and that's what he had earned.
So going into the 1974 season, Marty admitted he was really nervous about following Al Michaels. Now, we know of Al Michaels now as the Do You Believe in Miracles guy, but remember, that was 1980. 1974, Al Michaels was an extraordinary broadcaster, but he was only known in Cincinnati at the time. He was not national yet. But Marty felt the pressure. The second spring training game that Marty ever broadcast for the Reds, it was at Al Lopez Field. And he goes on the air and he says, "Welcome to Al Michaels Field." And he has said that it's one of the most embarrassing moments of his career. But Joe Nuxhall, his new broadcast partner, during the commercial break, he leans over to him and he says, "I've already got material for the off-season banquet circuit." And from there, it was born. Marty and Joe, they established that they would just laugh and have a good time together.
Can we remember that Joe Nuxhall was in the major leagues when he was 16 and it did not go
16.
well? Yeah, he was a 16-year-old, and Stan Musial and the St. Louis Cardinals tore him apart, and they sent him down to the minor leagues for 8 years. And when he was 24 years old, he came back up, and now he was ready for the major leagues. So I think he understood. So here's Marty Brennaman at age 31. He could not have been in better company.
Okay, so that sets the stage for how Marty Brennaman got to the big leagues and the uncomfortable moment early in spring training. Now let's get to opening day, first year for Marty Brennaman on the air, and something very significant happening.
With a pause, the 3-1 pitch. Swung on, long shot into deep left field. Rose is back, and that ball is gone. A home run. Unbelievable. Henry Aaron has just tied Babe Ruth's home run record of 714 with a clout over the 375 marker in left field. The Braves are piling out of the dugout. The crowd is on its feet in mass here at Riverfront Stadium as Hank Aaron has just hammered a 3-1 pitch from Jack Billingham over the left field wall, and the Braves are out front 3-0.
What a moment for opening day. And I say he nails it. A classic call, descriptive, detailed. I think it's just a fabulous call where if I'm a Cincinnati Reds fan, I'm thinking, wow, we did hire the right guy. This guy's on it.
This is a journalistic observer. He's hitting all the facts. I love his word choices, and I will continue to love his word choices over the course of the show as we watch all of his different clips. There's Joe feeling it. There's Marty reporting it as it happens. There's no pause to let the moment breathe. This is continuing to go through, but describing where did it go, describing what he sees, and then putting this moment into time. 3-1 pitch, Jack Billingham on the mound. He understood what was happening in front of him, and then he delivered it.
You mentioned the different words that he uses. There was an unabated in the Pete Rose clip. So I just wrote down unabated so that we can continue to keep track of the different words that he uses. Yeah, I think that this is
filing, right? They were filing out of the dugout. The crowd is on its feet en masse. We can keep on going. But that he uses these words, he doesn't stop with them. His vocabulary is just so expansive that he knows exactly how to bring his language to life without stopping with it, because his delivery, I would argue, is very direct, right? He's known for being blunt. He gets to the point, but he gets to the point using the right incisive words.
He even used hammered to describe the home run by Henry Aaron there, which is probably not a coincidence since his nickname was Hammer and Hank. So more about the background of Marty Brennaman. He originally was a theater kid, then decided to go the communications route. He had a job at a television station. He worked on the morning news and then subbed for the sports anchor. And then his second jobs is when he got more into sports. And again, I think you said that journalistic sense. I think you really sense the journalistic background of Marty, both in the words that he uses, also the cadence, the kind of, I don't want to say intensity, but there's very much a straightforward, we've got news here to deliver, and these are the different points that happened.
I agree. I think you can tell who he was brought up on. And the newscaster saying facts of the moment and just going right through. He delivers the facts. Here's what's happening. Here's what I see. And off we go. I think that news background really lends well to him. Even as he gets more into his career and he starts to put his opinions behind it, it becomes the op-ed editorial guy. But I think you do see that TV newscaster in him.
Okay, so it's really interesting you brought that up, because I always thought of Marty as, like you said, very blunt. There was famously a time in which him and Ken Griffey Jr. got into it because he thought the junior was loafing it down the bases. There was a time that Davey Concepcion apparently wanted to punch him out because of something that Marty said. And so I always just thought of Marty as that way. He's just going to tell it to you straight how he sees it. But that was not always the case, Jesse. When I look back and did research on Marty, when he first started out, he was an over-the-top homer. He has admitted this. He has admitted that when he listens back to himself early in his career, he cringes about how often he would use we and us and things like that. And there was famously a time that a player for the Cincinnati Reds came up to him and said, "How many hits did you get today, Marty?" And that set off a light bulb in his brain. And he thought, I can no longer broadcast this way. I can't use we and us. And it changed his style. Now, certainly, the glory days of the Big Red Machine, there was not a whole lot of negative things that were happening. But after 1990, there was a long stretch there where the Reds were not good. And that's when Marty really found his voice. That's when he really found the op-ed. And because he had built up 16 years of karmic energy and 16 years of respect for what he had done, he now had earned the right to criticize the Reds the way that he criticized the Reds.
Don't you think, though, that getting brought in his early 30s, alongside Joe Nuxhall, who had pitched for the Reds and pitched for the Reds for years and was very much a part of the organization and was the fan on air and was very much living and dying with everything that goes on and was enjoying it and was openly a human being, I bet that affected him right away. I bet that affected the way that he perceived everything that was happening and changed his words. And then when he was able to distance himself, now he's experienced. Now he's seen enough Major League Baseball. Now he's able to say, well, what is exactly the perspective that I should have?
All right, let's skip ahead to another call, because I think that this is a really interesting moment that's also fairly early from Marty's career. This is also during the glory days of the Big Red Machine, but it wasn't always just the hitters that stole the glory during the Big Red Machine days.
You've got speed at first base in Jerry Mumphrey and blistering speed at the plate in Gary Templeton. It would be very tough to double them up. Seaver's 1-0 to the plate, and that swung on and missed. A fastball up and away, and Templeton could not get it. 1-1. Knight now about even with a bag at third, but creeping in slowly as Seaver comes back to Templeton. Bouncing ball, shortstop. Concepcion. Morgan will hold the throw at second base as they get the force out on Mumphrey. 2 away in the Cardinal ninth inning, and Seaver is 1 out away.
Notice he did not use the word no-hitter, but he did say 1 out away.
The batter is George Hendrick as they start to their feet here at Riverfront Stadium. Seaver 1 out away from the first no-hitter of his major league career, and what would be the 14th in the long history of the Cincinnati Reds. George Hendrick, big, strong, right-handed batter, has gone hitless in 3 times. He has struck out once. Seaver pitches. Hendrick takes a strike. Now the crowd begins to roar with every pitch. Mumphrey has been forced at second. Templeton, the runner at first, 2 out. The strike one pitch coming to Hendrick. He swings and pops it foul, but it's going to be out of play as Donnie Werner runs to the near end of the Cincinnati dugout, and it falls back in the stands. Strike 2.
How about the hustle of the catcher there?
There has never been a no-hit game pitched by a Cincinnati Reds pitcher here at Riverfront. The last Reds no-hitter thrown was back on the 30th of April, 1969 by Jim Maloney. At Crosley Field, he no-hit the Houston Astros 10-0. Seaver is a strike away. He stretches. He checks the runner. He pitches. He pitches high. A fastball.
Watch Seaver's face.
They are standing all over the ballpark. Hendrick waiting on Seaver's 1-2 pitch. Tom sets, he kicks and fires. He pops it up, and it's going to be out of play directly back.
They didn't need a pitch timer back then. Look how fast he's working.
So Tom Seaver now a strike away from his first major league no-hitter. The Reds leading at 4-0 in the ninth inning. Hendrick puts a head of the bat on the plate. Werner hangs a sign. Seaver with a pause, the check and the pitch. He bounces to first base. Dreesen has it. He goes to the bag, and Seaver's got it. Tom Seaver has pitched his first major league no-hitter, and this one belongs to the Reds. Seaver is being mobbed at first base as George Hendrick bounces a routine two-hopper to Danny Dreesen, and the 38,216 at Riverfront Stadium are standing. Tom Seaver has thrown the first no-hitter of his major league career, the 14th no-hitter in the long history of the Cincinnati Reds, and he did it in almost routine fashion tonight. He throws his hat high over his head, acknowledging the applause and the recognition of this crowd at Riverfront Stadium. Tom Seaver has thrown the second no-hit, no-run game in the National League in 1978. Bob Forsch did it 2 months ago to the very day when he no-hit the Philadelphia Phillies 4-0, and Tom Seaver has no-hitted the St. Louis Cardinals here tonight against the crowd here, a tremendous crowd, and Seaver winning at 4-0, his first major league no-hitter, and what a ball game.
I think that's a fantastic call, Jesse, and I think it also illustrates, once again, the news background. Even the way that he said major league no-hitter. I don't know if it's because Tom Seaver thrown a no-hitter in the minor leagues or in high school or in college, but I thought that stood out to me, the way that he said his first major league no-hitter. That stood out to me. That was a lot of information that he quickly gave. His style was definitely not one to just pause and get up and stretch and let the crowd do its thing. He had a lot of info to deliver to you. I don't think he's rushing the info. I think he's delivering the information at a good pace. And one thing that I really appreciate about Marty that we heard both with the Pete Rose call and also with that one is the way that he describes what the player is doing. Wow. He acknowledges the crowd this way, or just the different things that he describes. I think he does a really good job of describing action that is not baseball action.
It's observational play-by-play. It's what does he see? I went back, I watched the whole ninth inning, and what I was thinking the whole time before the final batter was, he is ice cold. He is so straightforward and businesslike in delivering this call and confronting the idea that this could be a no-hitter. Starting the ninth, 3 outs away from a no-hitter. Now he's 2 outs away. Now he's 1 out away. Let me give you all the context so that way you can understand if he throws this no-hitter, what would be the historical context behind it. First for the stadium, second for the season, first for Tom Seaver. He's got everything right there in front of you, and he's delivering it to you before a no-hitter is thrown, just to let you understand. So he's not shying away from the idea. And then the moment that that ball is chopped to Dan Dreesen at first base, and you see all the straightforward newsmen, it's over. He breaks. Dreesen has it. He steps on first. Seaver's got it. And I love it. That's where the emotion comes through, and you can feel it. And because there's been this straightforward build, I feel it all the more. I could feel the tension building the whole time. And then Tom Seaver accomplished it. After, do you remember his smile, that smile that hit his face after he fired too high, he overthrew. It really is a fantastic capper and a fantastic final out for a terrific moment in Reds history.
Much different style than Vin Scully, right? We've really broken down the details of how Vin takes you into the dugout. He takes you to the bullpen and what the different emotions might be feeling for those on the field. And Marty's very much, this guy at first base is fast. This guy at home plate is really fast. It's going to be hard to turn a double play. And indeed, when there's the ground ball to the shortstop and Joe Morgan doesn't even bother trying for the double play because he knows how fast it is. that ended up being perfect foreshadowing about what's at stake here for Tom Seaver, that he's really going to have to face 2 more batters. It's very doubtful that he's going to end the game with a double play right here. So I think he does a fantastic job of foreshadowing not just the historical aspect of it, but also the players, their speed, their tendencies, what they can do. And I think it's a fabulous call.
By the way, how hard was that potential breakup slide at second base that Joe Morgan just nonchalantly walks away from?
That's also an example of baseball in the 70s, right? That would be, we would have full hour-long discussions on that nowadays. And back then it was, he slid in quickly and strongly, and Joe Morgan got out of the way. It's time for the next batter.
Yeah. Gary Templeton didn't just have speed. He had blistering speed. And so the entire way through, it's just Marty Brennaman saying, here's the moment. It is foundational baseball play-by-play. There isn't poetry here. There is newsman journalistic. Here's what's happening. And now Tom Seaver, the whole way through, where is he? We're not getting the full biography of Tom Seaver and the Braves and the Mets. It is, here's the pitch. Let me tell you about, here's the pitch and what's happening right now here in the stadium and what could happen with this no-hitter. And I thought it matched the moment outstanding. This is, as you said, a superb call. I agree.
One of the things that's been interesting, Jesse, when we've looked at different calls of announcers is how much their voices change, how much their styles might change. So that was in the late 1970s. I believe it was 1977 off the top of my head. Now we're going to skip ahead to 1988 when Marty's still on the mic with the Cincinnati Reds, also on the verge of history as a pitcher on the mound. And so now we can compare and contrast the Marty from the 1970s and the Marty from 1988.
He is ready for the 2-2 to Woodson, and here it comes. And it is swung out and missed. And Tom Browning has pitched a perfect game. 27 outs in a row, and he is being mobbed by his teammates just to the third base side of the mound. A perfect game thrown by Tom Browning on this Friday night, September the 16th, 1988, as he no-hits the Los Angeles Dodgers 1-0 and throws the first perfect game in the long and legendary history of this great Cincinnati Reds baseball franchise. And now Browning being hoisted to the shoulders of his teammates. And boy, what a memorable scene on a wet, dreary evening here in Cincinnati. A night that the fans had to wait 2 hours and 27 minutes for. And brother, was the wait worthwhile. And this one belongs to the Reds.
And this one belongs to the Reds. That was one of his trademark calls. I really appreciate a couple of things about that, Jesse. Number one, the timestamp, which he did not do with Tom Seavers. He did that one with Tom Browning, but also reminding us about this lengthy rain delay before the game even got underway. That was one of the big storylines, was how long they waited. And brother, it was worth the wait is a great description there by the great Marty Brennaman.
So what do you think? Did that voice change very much?
Not much. Not much at all. It sounds shockingly similar. And also kudos to the audio engineer for the Cincinnati Reds over the years, because we've talked before about how sometimes the audio level of the crowd versus the mic may not be exactly what it is. But I feel like with all of these, we really hear Marty shining through, and the crowd in the background a really good level. And I don't know. Am I wrong here? Does his voice sound that much different to you, Jesse?
Here's my question. He doesn't peak, and he's shouting. When there's a big moment, Marty shouts. That voice gets loud. And yet, like, everything's compressed so well. He never, ever peaks, even as his voice gets to its utmost volume to express his excitement of it. He's not a broadcaster who goes in for musicality. There's not highs and lows, and we're going to stay away from the monotone. We're going to go up, we're going to go down. Everything is here. And within here, he has ways of making words stand out. He can punch words. He can go a little bit. He can pause. He can slow down. He can speed up. But when he gets into it, he is going to get loud and really let you know about it. And there are no peaks.
I think he's really good too at describing the action of a celebration. Just to the left of the pitcher's mound, he's being mobbed. Different ways that he describes. Even with Pete Rose, he mentioned how he circles around with his cap. I think he just does a really good job of continuing to describe what is happening in the celebration. And I think that goes back to his news background, his journalistic background, where he's going to give you these facts about what's happened historically and still continue to describe what he has seen exactly as much as he can.
Yeah. I think that with the Tom Seaver call, we saw him run out of steam a little bit in the end as he's going through every single thing. And now by this point, it's 1988, and now he understands. Okay, here's the information I want to give. Here's what I want to describe in the moment, what I see, which I think that's a difficult balance to strike. What context to add, what historical facts, and what to simply say, here's what is happening on the field.
Yeah, that's a good point. If there was something to criticize about the Tom Seaver call, is that when he is going through all of these details, I think you could give it a pause after each one of these. I think that he could let it breathe a little bit. I mean, he was definitely not the type of style where he's going to just be quiet for long, long stretches. But I think that he could, even if it's just to give your voice a chance to relax and then move on with the next fact about no hitters and how often they've occurred, that would probably be a valid criticism from the Tom Seaver call. And then that, again, I think that just as much as letting the audience rest and also letting your own voice rest in those moments.
All right, so we've seen Marty in the 70s, and this is Marty in the 80s. What do you have for more recent highlights?
Ooh, I'm glad that you asked.
So here's Burdick, and here's Bruce. And a high fly ball, center field. He hit it a ton. It's gone. And the 2010 Central Division Championship belongs to the Cincinnati Reds. Jay Bruce explodes the first pitch into the grass and straightaway center field. He is being mobbed by his teammates. They met him at home plate. They ran him up the first base foul line. They're approaching the mound. The bullpenners are coming out, and everybody's getting in on the celebration at the mound as the crowd roars here at Great American Ballpark. The first pitch, he rockets onto the lawn and straightaway center field. His 22nd home run of the season, and this one belongs to the Reds. What a scene down on the field. The players, it all belongs to them out beyond the mound. The coaching staff, the manager, they come in very, very slowly. Jay Bruce, the happiest young man in this ballpark. He had a rough night until he got what he wanted and hit it out of here to center field. A home run that wins the game and wraps up the National League Central Division Championship.
What do you think, Jesse?
So the rough night for Jay Bruce. He had struck out twice. He had grounded into a double play. There's your background for that. I would like to focus on a specific line that Marty says. He says, as the crowd roars here at Great American Ballpark. What that makes me think of is my game recaps that I write after our games. And what I generally write for the first sentence is, I'll say, somebody goes 3 for 4 with 2 homers as this team defeats this team on Thursday night at this stadium. So I'm saying, once again, it's journalism. Does a broadcaster need to say, as the crowd roars, or does the broadcaster need to step back and just have the fans listen to that? But that is Marty, once again, planting it right here and saying, the crowd is roaring at this stadium in this time. So that way, whenever we hear his call ever again, if you play that, you'll know exactly where that moment took place. And that is Marty being Marty, as well as him describing that ball exploding from Jay Bruce's bat. So there are things that he says that if we were critiquing a different broadcaster, we might say, that's excessive wordiness. You don't actually need to say that. But because of what you and I have already talked about, we understand why he's saying it.
Once again, it's another clip where, man, That's a lot of words all in a row. And I think it works for Marty because he has the type of voice that can sustain that. And that's his style. I think that he could give himself a little bit of a breather here or there, but overall, he packs in a lot. And, his signature, that this one belongs to the Reds. He uses for the Central Division belongs to the Reds in that moment. We did hear Joe Nuxhall in the background there briefly, getting super excited about that home run call. I think it's another, to me, this, as we listen to Tom Seaver, Tom Browning, Pete Rose, Jay Bruce, just the consistency in Marty's style. If we didn't tell you what year it was, you may not know the difference in those years because of the audio quality, because of his voice, because of his style. How do you last 41 years? He maintained an extremely similar style for 4 decades. And these are great examples of how this is his style and this is how he delivers it to you.
Yeah. Henry Aaron, 1974. And now that was when Marty was 31 years old. And now 36 years later, Jay Bruce in 2010. I do want to say something big picture. And that is, if you didn't grow up in Cincinnati, if you didn't grow up listening to Marty Brennaman and Joe Nuxhall calling games, I don't think that this is a style that you will immediately say, this is my kind of broadcast. I think that you could never have heard Vin Scully before in your life and then hear Vin's poetry and hear Vin lay out to let the crowd roar and then Vin come back in to lay a larger big picture idea about the moment and say, wow, that was really marvelously said. What a wonderful painter of words. And Marty, I think you actually have to hear more of him. The highlight truly doesn't say it, which is why I'm glad that we're going to listen to a larger chunk of his stuff. When I first started watching Marty highlights, I don't think that I got it. I think I thought to myself, all right, this is fine. This is not actually great. And then I'm listening to the larger broadcast leading up to it, the larger extent. And that's when I'm going, now I get it. It's not the taste. You've got to enjoy the meal to enjoy Marty Brennaman.
I think you just brought up a really good point, Jesse, about how we get influenced and who we hear and who we even have the access to hear. Nowadays, you can buy all of the subscriptions. You can listen to the radio, the TV calls of both teams. All of that is at your disposal. You can go back on YouTube, as you and I do for Crafting the Call, and we can look at all of these things. When you and I were growing up, we didn't have those options. For me, the only way that I knew how to broadcast baseball was listening to Bill King and Lon Simmons on the A's and listening to Hank Greenwald on the Giants and later some others, Ted Robinson and Wayne Hagan and many others in the Bay Area. But I learned how to broadcast baseball based on those 3 guys primarily. And then there would be the occasional game of the week that I would hear on television. Then as I started to get older, you'd start to hear a few more examples of calls from around the country. But really, the only thing that I knew, again, was Bill King, Lon Simmons, and Hank Greenwald. And so when I first started doing play-by-play as a college student at San Diego State, I didn't have 50 different options of different people who I had heard throughout my life. In fact, when I got to San Diego and I heard Ted Leitner and Jerry Coleman do play-by-play, and I thought, what in the world are these guys doing? This is such a completely different style than what I am used to. And then over time, I grew to appreciate Ted Leitner's extremely conversational style. And then I just started to understand that there's different styles, that there's not one way and only one way to do it. And that's when you can start to formulate in your mind, in your brain. This is a style that I like. This is a style that maybe I don't like as much. This is another style that's only going to work for this guy. For me, I still go back to, this is what Bill King, Lon Simmons, and Hank Greenwald did. And that's just my primary overall style because that's what I heard at the youngest age. And so I don't have the information about who Marty listened to, but I wouldn't be surprised if his initial mentors, and I'm going to use mentors in air quotes because it's just the people that he listened to, probably had a similar style to him. Or again, it just goes back to his news background.
I have found that in what I read, and I'll read a story and I'll go, this is unbelievable. Wow. How did this person think about that? And then the more that I read their bio, and then I'll find a different writer and I'll go, oh, they're just writing a story based on the story from someone that they grew up reading, who is writing a story based on someone they grew up reading, who's writing a story based on someone that they grew up reading. They're all writing the same language. They're all writing basically the same kinds of stories, just updated to their lives. But this is where they're getting their words. This is where they're getting their descriptions. They're not actually reinventing the wheel, right? They're just doing tributes. And so for me, when I was growing up and started broadcasting, one of the chief criticisms that I got was, why are you so sing-songy? Why are your words up and down? And why is there so much melody? And why don't you just talk? And I'm going, that's the way that John Miller called the game. And I'm listening to John throughout my childhood, and it was just so beautiful. And I'm trying it, and I don't know my voice, so I can't call it like him, because nobody can call the game like him. John Sterling just stepped away. How many people grew up listening to John Sterling? And that is how a broadcaster should call a baseball game, is the Sterling style. It shapes your perception of it, which is why I really appreciate that we can go into each of these broadcasters and we can say, all right, let's actually look at this moment. And how would Marty Brennaman encapsulate this moment? How would Harry Callis encapsulate this moment? And not to say that they're wrong, to say, what are we getting out of this philosophy, this style for baseball play-by-play?
All right, I don't know why we continue to go back to watch World Series clips in which my favorite childhood team loses, but nonetheless, we are about to do it one more time here as we get a more extended look at Marty Brennaman.
700 WLW. Dave Henderson has retired the first two batters in the ninth inning and now goes to work on Mariano Duncan. He throws and Duncan takes the strike. I'm sure Dave Stewart has to wonder, or will be wondering, as he heads toward that third base dugout when he gets a final out of the Reds' ninth inning, whether he will get a chance to pitch again in 1990. Here's the pitch, and it's swung on, and that one's in the air to center field. Dave Henderson, who will lead off the bottom of the ninth, makes a catch, and that's all for Cincinnati. After 8.5 innings of baseball, the Reds are 3 outs away from a world title. They lead Oakland 2-1.
We appreciate how Hendu caught that ball.
Won 103 games.
Hindu's style is incredible.
Sweep the Red Sox in the American League Championship Series have come down to 3 final outs. They trail the Reds by 1. Cincinnati, with a World Championship in its grasp for the first time in 14 years, and Rio will have to get some tough customers and nail it down. Dave Henderson leads it off, and the pitch is swung on and missed. Once again, Myers and Dibble are up in the bullpen. A right-handed batter in Henderson, a left-handed batter in Baines, and a right-handed swinger in Carney Lansford. That is the trio who will definitely bat off Rijo here in the ninth inning. His strike one pitch to Henderson is fouled straight back, and Rijo in front 0-2.
Sliders.
For the record, Henderson has popped to second, struck out, and fly to center field. He takes his time, settling back in. The outfield is deep and straight away. Rijo rocking on the mound, throwing, and just down low and close enough for Henderson to think about. He started the bat around ever so briefly and was able to check it in time.
Josh, pause real quick.
2 strikes.
So this is something that Marty didn't have to worry about. He's calling the game on radio. And maybe people are turning down the TV and listening to the game on radio. We have to worry about this with MILB TV, with our call being put over MILB TV and also on radio. He called that pitch as being low. That pitch wasn't low. That pitch was outside, right? So it's tough for us as play-by-play broadcasters to sometimes see pitch locations. Have you dealt with that, Josh, where you call a pitch somewhere and then you look at it and you go, actually, that pitch wasn't where I thought it was?
Yes, absolutely, especially lately, because now that we have access in the Pacific Coast League, we're using the automatic ball strike system, or ABS, the robo-umps, which they're not really robots or droids. But anyways, and so we get the grid on a laptop, and it's on the video board where you can see exactly where a pitch missed. And sometimes, depending on where your location is at the ballpark, there's some where you're directly behind home. There's some you're a little bit third base side, a little bit up the first base side. And so what might look like it's inside or low by a little or by a lot. And then I check the grid that's available to me, and I realize, oh, I was wrong. That was way inside, or that was way low. Or so it's really interesting based on where your location is. And I've started to become a lot more self-conscious about this as well. I'm not going to lie.
Yes, me too. So this isn't about Marty. This is about us as broadcasters. We want to describe if a pitch misses, why did it miss? And so we have to actually take into account, what should I look at? Where should I be accountable to in order to be as accurate as possible? So this is from 1990. He doesn't have to worry about it, but for us, we do, because we don't want to say something like on the inside corner, and it actually wasn't.
A couple of other things about this. This is really interesting for me to watch this again, the television version, seeing the pictures and listening to Marty's radio call, because I'm in the second deck with my father watching this game, just mad as can possibly be, because you got to remember the 1990 Oakland A's. Okay, we know all about 88, Orel Hershiser, Kirk Gibson. 1989, the A's win the World Series, but there's an earthquake. We don't really get to celebrate it because they're still trying to find bodies in the rubble of the devastation that occurred. There was never a parade to celebrate it. And now 1990, here come the Oakland A's once again. We got Rickey Henderson for an entire season, not just for half a season. They won 100 games once again. They were the dominant team once again. They swept the Boston Red Sox once again. And the feeling was, finally, we're going to get a World Series title, and we're going to be able to celebrate this. And now the A's are down 3-0. The great Dave Stewart was defeated in game 1. And then Dennis Eckersley gets defeated in the 9th inning in game 2. And I don't even remember what happened in game 3, but I just know that I'm at game 4 with my dad because we had the tickets and we're not going to not show up. But here we are once again, Jose Rijo, former Oakland A's phenom that was traded away as part of the Dave Parker deal, which overall was a fantastic deal. And now it's Jose Rijo, the phenom who never could figure it out and was never healthy with the A's. And now he's healthy with the Reds, and he's about to beat my favorite team. And it was just so sad.
1 ball, 2 strikes. Bragg deep in left. Winningham in center. O'Neill in right. Sabo deep at third. Guarding the line is Benzinger is at first. Here's a pitch. And strike 3 call.
That's a ball. Come on.
And that is 9 strikeouts.
That's a ball.
Jose Rijo. And it is the 20th consecutive batter that he has put aside since the walk to Henderson with 2 out in the 2nd inning.
By the way, in the 8th inning, there was a check swing to Rickey Henderson where he totally did not go around.
And we are probably going to see Randy Myers be brought on to face a left-handed batter, which would then possibly put in the mind of one manager, Tony La Russa, to bring Jose Canseco off the bench to hit.
How about this strategy?
Blue has just now reached the stadium mound. Rio standing there with hands on hips, and the call has immediately gone to the bullpen for Randall Kirk Myers. So Rio, nothing short of brilliant tonight for 8 1/3 innings, leaves having retired 20 in a row and 9 strikeouts, and leads by a run. Myers will come on to attempt to finish it, and we'll be back in just a moment. Randy Myers on in relief, and as expected, Tony La Russa counters that move by bringing on the Cuban, as he is affectionately known on the Oakland Ball Club, Jose Canseco, to pinch hit for Harold Baines. The much maligned Canseco in this World Series. All the problems he had defensively in right field in the 2 games at Riverfront, and his anemic bat with only 1 hit in 11 times up. That a home run at Riverfront on Wednesday night, a gargantuan blast to the opposite field into the green seats in right. And he steps to the plate now, a non-starter tonight. It was shocking in many quarters of the masses of media who have covered this World Series. But he is at the plate tonight with one final chance at producing. And the pitch from Myers is at the knees for a call strike.
By the way, I was convinced that Jose was going to hit a home run inside this game as a kid.
Well, we'll see. He's facing Canseco, batting for Baines, and we may well see Rob Dibble come on to face Carney Lansford. But Myers gets a quick strike in. The Reds leading 2-1 with 1 out of the 9th. The pitch on the way, and a tie to even the count. After a year that saw him hit 37 home runs while driving in 101 runs, tailed off badly in the final 6-7 weeks of the year because of a back problem. Myers unloading, and it's fouled back and will fall just below our broadcast booth. Randy in front, 1 ball, 2 strikes.
Notice Canseco's reaction.
Oakland led until the Reds scored twice in the 8th. And that's the score, 2-1. Cincinnati,
Lou
2
Piniella
outs away
chose
from a world
Myers against
championship.
Canseco over Rijo versus Baines.
Jose Rio, 8 in the third innings, 2 hits, 1 run earned, 3 walks, 1 intentional, and 9 strikeouts. Myers to the belt and to the plate, and it's high, and it's 2-2. It has become a rather chilly night here in Oakland, California. The Reds fans with the ball club sitting in the upper deck, and they are way up in the sky, hoping that the bullpen and the Nasty Boys can finish it off. Canseco with a late swing, but with good bat speed, and got around on it to foul it off.
That's so good about the fans.
The A's came into this fourth game with a team batting average of .245. Compare that with the Reds' .342. Oakland has been checked on only a first-inning double by Willie McGee and a run-scoring single by Carney Lansford. They've not had a hit since the first.
Great
It is
recap, real
2-2
fast.
on Canseco. Oliver sets the target, the pitch, and just missing with a breaking ball down and in to run it full. Myers steps back on again as he's run the string out. Canseco right down on the end of the bat. Swung on, chopped toward third. Sabo charges. He gets, he throws, and they're 2 out. Routine ground ball to a charging Chris.
At this point, Jesse, I got into a screaming match with the fan who was behind me because he was making fun of Jose Canseco, and I turned around and screamed at him because I was so livid and I was so upset that this Ace fan was upset at Canseco, and I was yelling at him about true fans don't abandon their players just because they had, a bad day or a bad series. It was a very controversial time about, number one, Canseco not being in the lineup, how terrible his defense had become. You heard some names there, Harold Baines and Willie McGee. The A's acquired Harold Baines and Willie McGee on the last day of August to help them for the final month because Canseco could mostly DH back then, and he was struggling. And, it was sort of like the changing of the guard of what's going on with the A's best player. Yeah, and I just remember at this point, I'm screaming and yelling at a fan that's behind me, Jesse.
Tough times for young Josh.
You don't seem that concerned.
Sabo at third, and now will Lou Piniella stay with Randy Myers against Carney Lansford, or will he bring on right-hander Rob Dibble? Apparently, he's going to stay with Myers, and Lansford, who has had the last Oakland hit, steps to the plate representing Oakland's last hope. He has, since the first inning single, flied out and grounded out. Myers kicks and throws. Lansford takes it high. Ball 1. Their last World Series appearance in 1976 resulted in a 4-game sweep of the New York Yankees. 14 years later, they're trying to do it to Oakland. And Myers comes head high. 2 balls and no strikes. Jamie Quirk is due to bat next, but we note that Terry Steinbach has come out of the dugout and has moved to the on-deck circle. And if Randy Myers is unable to knock off Lansford, I think without question we'll see Dibble brought into the ballgame. He has grounded out Canseco after Rijo struck out Henderson to begin the night. Myers needs a strike, and it's chopped foul off third, 2-1. 7-0 in game 1, Cincinnati. 5-4 in 10 in the second game at Riverfront. Last night, 7 in the third, the Reds rolled to an 8-3 victory, and they lead 2-1 with 1 out to go in the bottom of the 9th inning, 1 out away from a world title.
Myers underhanding the ball that Ted Hendry gave to him and gets a new one back, and typically goes to the third base side of the mound and walks straight up to the pitching rubber. Lansford, good hitting Oakland third baseman, steps in, levels a bat. And Myers bringing it. And the pitch is hit in the air. Foul off first. Benzinger backing and calling. And the 1990 World Championship belongs to the Cincinnati Reds. As you might expect, they pile out of the dugout. They are jumping up and high-fiving. All smiles as Lou Piniella and his coaching staff break out of the dugout, gloves and caps all over the infield. The Cincinnati Reds have done the absolute improbable by defeating the club considered to be the best in Major League Baseball, and they've done it in a 4-game series sweep.
The Reds are in a huddle around the mound, just to the first base side of the mound. Security guards have come out and onto the field. The Oakland players, they have to be in a state of shock, as they have been since Game 1, when the Reds beat Dave Stewart 7-0, and they have never looked back.
14 years have gone by where the Reds have been sitting and watching. And now in 1990, they have claimed a World's Championship, and they have, without question, stamped themselves in this first year of a new decade as unquestionably the best team in Major League Baseball.
2-1 tonight to complete the series sweep. We'll be back in just a moment.
All right, obviously some different versions of audio put together there. I think that once again, we're still hearing the same trademark Marty Brennaman. I thought that his recap of Game 1, Game 2, Game 3 was really good in that moment to recap where things were. I felt that his description of the players coming out of the dugout, caps and gloves all over the place, it once again just shows the consistency of Marty. This was his style. He's going to give you a ton of information, and he is just going to keep delivering this information in a way where you can tell he's excited, but he's not over the moon losing his voice where he can't maintain his professionalism, which is just the trademark of Marty Brennaman.
Yeah, I want to compare this to the no-hitter for Tom Seaver, where I was highly impacted by that final call of the final out with Dreesen stepping on first base, where it broke and he felt it. He is trying to stay so level here, and you hear him be overcome for half of a second, right? Just trying to say Lou Pinella's name. That half of a second of the enormousness of this moment, that the Reds are champions, and how great is this? And right there, after that brief hiccup, right back into the level delivering of all of the facts of this moment and what is happening and the history of all of this, because it comes back into, let me tell you where we are. Let me tell you what is happening. Let me tell you who is doing what right now. I could have used a little bit more of the Dreesen moment, but that's not Marty. That's not the way that Marty wants to call this. He wants to deliver this like a newsman, and so he does, as the Reds are champions of baseball.
Can you hear a smile in his voice as he's delivering all of this?
A little bit, a little hint of it. It's not large, but I can hear the enjoyment. How about you?
I would say the same thing. I would also wonder, and I want to make this sound like he's not doing his job properly, but especially when we've listened to the 4 different versions of the Blue Jays defeating the Phillies, and you can really, if you didn't know who the announcers were, you'd probably have a pretty good guess of who was the employer, whether this was the Phillies or the Blue Jays or the national call. But if you didn't know Marty Brennaman's voice and you didn't know that this was Cincinnati Reds radio, you might think that this was the national radio call, because yes, you can tell that he's excited, but it's pretty subtle. He's delivering this moment very much in a news fashion. And it's surprising to me when I listen to the extended amount of it. But again, when I go back to, he admitted early in his career, he was an over-the-top homer. He said we and us, and he's embarrassed by what he did early in his career. And I think that you can hear the overcompensation to the point where we know that he's excited, but he's delivering this broadcast in a very journalistic fashion.
What I would expect nowadays is for players to be talked about. And I want to go back to Jose Canseco. And this is where I think Marty shows respect. And so as we talked about right from the very top, Marty's controversies and the bluntness, right? There is so much respect shown to the Oakland Athletics. And this is simply, the Reds have triumphed. They're the champions. Here's how great the A's were. Here's what the Reds did. And they win. Look at the TV call and look at the cameras. And you can tell the story that they are telling is that Jose Canseco has let down the A's. And he is the picture of the Oakland A's, the most dominant team back in the World Series for the third consecutive year. And why have the A's been swept? We're going to look right at Jose Canseco. He's going to be the face of First Take tomorrow, or the face of you name your talk show. And that's not the way that this game is called. The way that this game is called is, here's what is happening in the moment. Let's talk about the strategy. Let's talk about the players. Let's talk about how we got to this point. And now the Reds are champions. So there is no burying. There is no even elevating of individual players yet. Remember Tom Cheek starting to name people? We're not even going to talk about Jose Rijo and how great he was after the fact. During, yes. But right now we're going to talk about the team. We're not going to talk about the individual hitters. As a team, the Reds hit 340 in the World Series, right? Billy Hatcher was remarkable. We're not going to talk about that yet. We're going to talk about the team's triumph.
You mentioned the word strategy. He was really locked in on Dibble, the right-hander, Myers, the left-hander, warming up in the bullpen. And these are the options. These are the options for Lou Piniella. He might go to this reliever if this guy is used. Jamie Quirk's up next. Terry Steinbach is available. He might go to Rob Dibble. He stays really locked in on potential matchups and what might happen. And maybe that's just the sense, and I'm guessing here, about just how dominant the Oakland A's were. And even though they're down 3-0 and it's the bottom of the ninth inning, it just still felt like the A's had it in them. And the A's back then were such a team where if they could just win one game, you felt like they would become invincible again. I know that I felt that way as an A's fan. I was convinced that Canseco was going to hit a home run. That was going to tie it up. The A's were going to find a way to win game 4, and then they were going to win games 5, 6, and 7 again, because that's just how dominant they were. And those pictures in the A's dugout, you can see they are stunned. They are in shock. Yeah. And Jose is bending down, and you can tell that his back is bothering him. And I think that's a great way that you noticed and you put just the respect that Marty shows for the A's there, where it'd be really easy to kind of be like an over-the-top fan who's almost taunting the A's, and he wasn't like that at all.
How about, so he's bright. He understands exactly how Lou Piniella manages and the Nasty Boys bullpen. Couldn't you see an easy second guessing right here that Jose Rijo has set down 20 consecutive batters, no base hits against him since the first inning? Why are we going to the bullpen? And why, after going to the bullpen, we've got Randy Myers, and now we're talking about bringing Rob Dibble in, and there's the chance for, in another circumstance, in another year, on another broadcast, to be discussing Lou Piniella perhaps over managing. And what is he doing? And Tony La Russa on the other side in the dugout and his maneuvering. That can absolutely interfere in this broadcast as you start to get into, why is this happening? Should it be happening? Instead, it's Marty staying one step ahead. Here's what he might do. Here's why he would do it. And here's the hitter. And here's the pitch. And there's never any over talking. There's never any overthinking. We're staying right there on the field.
And also, Joe Nuxhall at this point is either down on the field getting ready to do interviews, or he's just letting Marty shine.
Yeah. Which, I mean, you and I, we'll get into this later. There is so much potential for this bottom of the ninth inning to go sideways out of nowhere because of the A's. And yet, here we go. Can I put this to you? Think about the way that he calls the final out. And think about what he says. Doesn't it seem like Marty expects the Reds to win? That it's caught, and as you might expect, they come out of the dugout. Like, think about his words, and there's this forthrightness to it of, yes, we are champions. And as you might expect, here they come. There's nothing over the top. It is simply the championship has occurred, as you might expect, and now from here on in.
I think that's because it was a 4-game sweep.
Yeah.
If it's best of 7 and it's gone back and forth and it's been tense down to the wire, I think if we're listening to Marty's call of game 2 when the Reds came back and got the victory over Dennis Eckersley, I think it would be much more of a startled excitement. I can't believe what I just witnessed type of moment. But at this point, it's 3-0. And again, the A's haven't had a hit since early in the game. So this was kind of a foregone conclusion. I'm talking about what I'm thinking about in the second deck, that the A's are going to come back. But that's because I'm 16 years old and I can't believe the A's are about to lose again. I'm trying to be positive. In the moment, as a broadcaster, this is a foregone conclusion that the Reds are winning this World Series.
How tough of a drive was that for you back home?
I remember, so I was with my dad, and I don't remember what we talked about. It was probably pretty silent, probably pretty quiet. Maybe we just started focusing on football or whatever else. I do remember that at one point, it was probably in the ride home when my dad looked at me and he goes, "So you really got into it with that Ace fan, huh?"
So, Josh, before you and I started recording, I asked you the question of how great of a broadcaster is Marty Brennaman? And we have now watched highlight upon highlight and the extended highlight and the World Series. This is a broadcaster that I did not grow up with, nor did you. What are your thoughts on Marty after watching all of this, listening to him?
I have a much greater appreciation for him, his style, his delivery, his longevity. I didn't know what to expect when we had this idea about Marty, because I mostly just knew of the guy who near the end of his career was very critical of Reds. But going back and listening to this, I think he is a great broadcaster. And I think as someone who went to journalism school and spent 10 years of my own as a newspaper reporter and still very much broadcast a baseball game from a journalistic standpoint, that's what I tried to think about in the moment, thinking about, again, the way that Bill King broadcasted games. I have a much greater appreciation for Marty Brennaman.
I agree. I think that we can learn from him and we can take elements that he brought to his broadcast into our broadcasts that would therefore elevate them.
All right. This has been really fun. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, just, hey, how about these moments in Cincinnati Reds history? 70s, 80s, 1990, 2010. But it all began his first regular season game. He called Henry Aaron hitting .714. How does a broadcaster debut in the major leagues with Henry Aaron tying Babe Ruth? What a debut.
And then you go on to continue doing the same job for the same team for 41 years. Tip of my cap to Marty Brennaman for a fabulous career and going out on top when he went out retiring.
Josh, thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. This is Crafting the Call. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you again next week.